good morning, or good evening. Where am I? Anyway, okay. My name is Robert Valencia. It's an honor to be here in my brother's territory here and to share some of our knowledge with you. I listened to what you were saying and remembering, it wasn't too long ago that I think our whole tribal budget was maybe about a little over $100,000, and we pay a lot more to people that are within our employment, a lot more than that right now. So we changed. We looked at initially about what I'm talking about is a period about the mid-70s. We got recognized as a federal Indian tribe. We had nowhere to go. Our little village of 202 acres was really, people were starting to move out. There was no employment, there was no transportation. Water was something we had to haul. So the effect of the transformation from the federal recognition status allowed us to do a lot of things that we weren't able to do. And one of the side things that I do is I teach an adjunct faculty with the community college, and I look at the historical part of the tribe in terms of how we have progressed, how we've changed our attitude towards things. We thought that we're about 12 miles southwest of Tucson, Arizona. We thought we'd be by ourselves here, live by ourselves, and you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone type of thing. But, that didn't work out too well. So the other is, there was a dependency factor of somebody doing something for us. And the historical part of that is that probably 9 out of 10 times or projects or anything that anybody did for us failed. Could be 10 out of 10. So we determined that in order for us to get up and get things done, we had to have our own hand and our own fate. So that was kind of like a kick in the pants, kind of kicking and screaming, saying, okay, well, we really don't know, what do we have to bring? So we got out of that mode and determined that we do have a lot to offer, and that in order for us to build our future, we need to be part of building that future. So, and we're taking that type of. We do have about 17,000 tribal members within Arizona and all over the country. I just came from being in Fresno 2 days ago. We have about 1,000 members, so we met with about 200 of them, and we talk about services. They were very interested in, the economic development on the reservation. What are you guys doing, and all that kind of stuff. So we do have about 40,000. They're not necessarily part of our tribal membership in the U.S. because you have to be a U.S. citizen, but they are 40,000 Yaqui in the state of Sonora, which is about 375 miles from us. So the things that we've done, been successful at, some of the projects like the low-hanging fruit, which are the casinos and things like that, we do have that. We learned several things. One is you can't do things in isolation. So in 2002, for example, there was a gaming compact that was about to expire, and we took a huge risk in building a casino because we didn't know if the gaming compact was going to pass, and we didn't know who the governor was going to be. So. But part of that, I was the chairman at the time. Part of what we had to do is knock on the doors, because even though we lived there in Tucson for quite a long time, it seemed like nobody knew who we were. So that was very successful in that we had a lot of support, a lot of a lot of support from a lot of very influential people, and eventually the measure itself won in Tucson. The governorship race was also, she won in Tucson. So it was a measure of the tribe also progressing in terms of political power, you might call it, and then we're trying to do is build on this and help our people live in Sonora. I wanted to bring a video of a little project that was going on there, but last week I could digress for a little bit. Last week we had a repatriation commemoration of a massacre that occurred in 1902. And we had our ceremonies, our candlelight vigil, and there was a screen in which we were showing a videotape, and my laptop was connected to it. And there was 2 AV guys that we contracted through to show, to work the technical part. Anyways, one of them says, we're both looking at this screen and the cursor just moved from one area to another and clicked on the movie and turned itself on because, we thought, how rude these people, we're trying to have this little ceremony here. All of a sudden the movie goes on, the speaker goes like really loud, the volume. And I saw that both of them were looking at each other and says, we didn't do it. It did it by itself, seriously. So I guess it's still possessed, so I was having a little trouble showing that movie, so I gave up. So I apologize for that. But, that's the other thing we learned is that before if something like this happened, then I would walk out and take out because I said, I don't want to be embarrassed. The difference is, nowadays we say, okay, that happened, let's see what else we can do. So that's why I didn't get up and eat. But we are looking at the very rudimentary steps, the very tiny steps that we're taking, and starting to assess the successes and we have failures, of course, of what we're doing, how we're going to apply those in Sonora. It's Mexico is a whole different country, a whole different set of laws. They don't have the support that we do in the United States. There's no such thing as federal recognition, although we're working on it too. I would say something close to it. And the general oversight of Indigenous affairs is a dependency created by the government agencies. So it's well known, it's the first of the month, so here you go, and we'll see you next month. That doesn't do anything for anyone. So what they're trying to do at this point in time is to say, the other part of that is exploitation of their natural resources. They have the best agricultural land and the best seafood, about 80 kilometers of coastal waters. Everybody else is making money but them. So part of what the business people, the government says is that, this is an Indian tribe, and in Mexico they don't have title to the land, so therefore it's not going to be possible to do business. What about the millions of dollars you guys are making out of these people? So in all, there's small projects that excuse me, they're looking at including this. It's what's called a Torim Produce. It's a greenhouse, and they have a contract on the U.S. side with a company called Sunbelt for cucumbers. It's very interesting because it has a potential to really grow. It employs a number of people, and there's other projects that they want to do. But one of the things, though, is that they're very concerned with is that it's primarily wheat country. So the people that come in rented have really overused pesticides. So they're trying to get away from that, and they're trying to look at more sustainable ways of really working with the natural resources they have. So it's very interesting. We have a group that is going to come in and visit one of our neighboring tribes about 100 miles away, close to Phoenix. They're going to look at the farming, the cattle ranching, and the irrigation district, because in the area they're in, they are the last, in all Mexico, they're the last entity, I guess, that doesn't have, that the government still runs the irrigation district. So they want to transfer this. About 3 weeks ago, the governor of Sonora addressed him. They had given him 20 points of things that they would like him to really address. He in turn says, well, I'll build you a hospital, and tomorrow we can do the irrigation district. Well, somewhere along the line, they're going to be in the middle, and things are going to happen. They expect things to happen. And the attitude, again, is that we can make things happen. Before it's, well, we'll try to get next time. This time it's no. Here's what we have. Here's the plan that we have. Here's the people that are behind us, such as Professor Hopkins and others who, it was interesting because they read a letter a couple of weeks ago, and according to one of the elders, they said, wow, that made the governor's knees shake, literally. And they never had this, backing. So I guess with that, kind of give you a picture of what's happening on both sides and the development that is to come. On our side too, we have to deal with the trust land that we have. We can do almost everything that's legal on trust land. However, we also own simple fee land, in which the county calls the shots. So we're trying to work with that because they can't give us preferential treatment. A law is a law, so whether it's on our side of town or the other side of town, it limits or restricts what we can do. So, for example, we want to build a golf course, but part of it, we only have, I think, half of the land that is ours and trust land, it's trust status. The other half is in county, so we have to figure a way of working around that. So there's a number of challenges, but there's a lot of opportunities in which the tribe can really participate. In Mexico also there's a program called the Tres por Uno. It's 3 for 1. For every $1 invested, they assert that there's a dollar from a matching dollar from the federal, state, and the local municipios, the municipalities. And that existed, however, this year in Sonora there's been an alignment of the parties. The Banistas, the Partido Acción Nacional in Sonora, the governor is of the same party as the president. Makes a huge difference. Before they would attack to each other, they could say, well, we have this Tres por Uno, but the federal government doesn't want to match because you have a Priista governor here, and we're not going to. So again, he's got about a year and a half. He's a year and a half out, so this thing's got to work really fast now. But I think I took my lion's share here. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I was just getting into listening to these two, so I was hoping that they would carry on for the rest of the meeting. I could learn something. Anyway, my name is Chief Alan Claxton. My Sinchothan name is Scott Colina. That name was given to me by my father because I was the one little guy, right from that size, that followed him around everywhere and learned how to hunt and fish his farmland. That's what our Douglas Treaty guarantees us. We're guaranteed to hunt and fish as farmland in our village sites and our enclosed fields will be protected forever. Well, none of that's really been the case. We've always honored our treaty, and the government has never honored it. But we moved past that. Ever since I was a young man, I always thought I was going to be the chief of my nation. And I remember once at a party I stated that, and I was the laughing stock of the party that night. That's what happens when you're involved in alcohol and everything else. But it happened. I remember taking a few tries to get on council, or 2 or 3 chances. I didn't make it in. Finally got in and spent 2 terms on council. I remember being in Vancouver, and one of the elder council members phoned me and said, the election's coming up, we want you to run for chief. I said, well, I just want to stay on council for a while, learn some more. But he convinced me to withdraw my name from council and run for chief. And so what happens is, we got to the election and we got to counting the ballots, and there was one more ballot left in the box, and me and my uncle were tied in votes. So they pulled out the ballot, and my uncle won. So that was the last time I had some time off, actually. I had 2 years off. And so actually went out in the parking lot and cried, and I went home and moved on, and then the next year I won in a landslide. And I've had 10 consecutive wins for chief since then. So 10 consecutive terms, 20 years. When I was first on council, that's when we implemented property tax. And that was quite a struggle with the municipality. And the reason for that is because the municipality was collecting property tax off reserve, and so they had a $500,000-$600,000 slush fund to draw from to use in the municipality, and none of it was coming back to the reserve. But then the legislation supported this, so we implemented that. The next step was the Sydney North Saanich and Central Saanich were moving to building a new sewer treatment plant. The original one was on reserve, our reserve, and we said, well, no, you guys go ahead and move off, we're going to keep this one, which we did. We downsized it and upgraded it, and that cost a lot of money. The reason for that is because every time we went to government or municipality to ask for more downstream capacity, they'd say no. And so we said, this will be a better chance for the future for economic development, commercial development, what have you. So we moved past that, and now we have 2 of our young people trained operating the sewer treatment plant. When I was a young chief, I used to go to the Summit of Chiefs in Vancouver, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, BCAFN, and the National Assembly of First Nations. And I would really sit and listen to some of the chiefs, the chiefs that were there before me, that were still there, such as Manny Jules, I'm sure you've heard of him, Chief Robert Louis from West Bank, and saw the initiatives that they were into. So I got to know Manny Jules, and got to know Robert Louis quite well. So I'm going to take this initiative home, and I'm going to implement it in my First Nation. So the first one we did was lands management. We opted out of that legislation in the Indian Act and opted into our new own lands management in our community, which gives us control over our own lands. The reason for that is because when you try to move on to commercial development or anything for that matter, it could take a lifetime going through Indian affairs, going through that bureaucracy. The next thing that we moved into is, and that was with the help of Manny Jules and Andre Ladresse in Kamloops, as well as the feds in Ottawa. We opted out of the GST here in our community and opted into our newly developed sale First Nation tax. So that GST stayed in our community and has now for 3 years, and it's in the amount of $1.3 million a year. So I've always stated, especially when I'm talking to young people, that for a healthy community we need 3 things in motion. We need to be implementing your health. We also have to be supporting education. And the third is economic development that paid for all of this stuff. So the reason that we opted out of all this Indian Act, for example, for fishing, hunting and fishing is formally. I remember as a kid going to the band office, and there would be cases and cases of creme and sardines. right there in Band Office for distribution. That was the government saying, you don't have to hunt and fish anymore, we'll look after you. And that stuff wasn't very healthy. Our people were extremely healthy back then because they lived off the ocean, they lived off the land, and as we now get into this newer generation of McDonald's and KFC, which is our new traditional food, we're not as healthy as we used to be, but we're moving back that way. Just this past weekend, we held our 4th annual seafood festival, and that cost us approximately $10,000. We had about 1,000 people show up. I was behind the barbecue for 5 hours. So I was sunburnt in the back and barbecued in the front. But the reason that we hold that seafood festival is because we need to intermingle with everybody in our communities to tell them the importance of getting along, working together, and moving forward. And I saw as a chief that supporting welfare, social development wasn't the real answer. We needed to create self-sufficiency for ourselves. And that's why we moved into what we call them is setting up these pillars, and we have more pillars to set up to become totally independent. Right now, we hired a firm called Professional Development Group to help us move forward a commercial mall right on the south boundary of our reserve on the Pat Bay Highway. And the reason for that is because it'll create revenues not only for those landowners that own that land, but also for the band, because we are the taxing authority, so it will increase that GST from 1.3 to up to 4 or 5 times that for the mall that size. And with our health department, we have our priorities listed. We just built and completed an $8 million gymnasium, state-of-the-art, and we had to dig down underneath it, so we created 4 large classroom spaces underneath the gym, so we can have pilot deals with perhaps UVic, Camosun, other education facilities out there, and have a good working agreement so we keep our young people educated or trained, whatever the need may be. We also, when we work out deals with developers, we say part of the deal is to get these young people working. We don't want them working unless they're properly trained for those positions. So we're moving forward that way, but I'm recently elected to be the chairman of the San Antonio School Board, so we're looking for our partners in the school districts as well as the other universities and what have you in our territory. So everything is moving forward to try to work together and support each other. And like I say, even with moving out of Indian Affairs lands, the problems, I think we have over 200 outstanding issues that we believe Indian Affairs should have been responsible for. And our people get frustrated over that. I say, well, at least we've stopped the damage. They're not creating any more damage in our community because they're not involved anymore. So we are trying to move forward, and it's always a challenge, but I think we've gotten a foot and a half out of Indian Affairs, and we hope to be someday totally out of their realm. Thank you.
Usually at this time, the panel breaks into sort of de facto moderation here on my part. We can open it up to the audience. I just thought I would ask each of you the same question in terms of the challenges that you see for accessing capital. So, for example, if it's you know, a project at the community level, if it doesn't, for example, fit within the descriptions of a multilateral development bank's portfolio, you know, financing those types of projects, or alternatively, in the case of the United States, if it's a federally recognized tribe that's trying to access capital for, say, energy development, which has been a widely discussed topic recently, particularly with a focus and sensitivity to green energy. If there's something that could be done there, and then finally, in regard to Canada, on the access to capital question. Again, one of the themes that seems to be emerging is an inability of local non-Aboriginal governments to see the potential in partnerships with First Nations governments, and in particular in the area of capital infrastructure, public works, and the like. So I just thought I would put that out there as a sort of a general, if you see, I'm not saying what is the magic wand, but what are some of the structural solutions that you see that could be done? And I'll start with you, Christina, because you were excited.
I think he kind of answered. Don't you? That's tough. It's tough, kind of on speaking about the Inter-American Development Bank, because you know, part of the issue is, I think, the valuing what communities have. And of what I've seen in working in all these different countries and working in Canada and the United States is that, I mean, this stuff doesn't become valued until someone else says there's a value. And so what we're seeing now is this issue of climate change, for example. So the indigenous communities in Latin America, a lot of communities live very far from urban centers. And it's difficult to get to, there's not a lot of infrastructure. Every once in a while there's some tourism that has become a reason for people to go there, but for the most part. But when you start looking at the maps of these areas, and now this whole climate change it's getting faster and faster and faster. And we haven't really addressed a lot of the issues yet, like land issues, resource rights issues, because these areas weren't valuable before. And so now they're valuable, because now when they start talking about trading the carbon, and I'm going to say all these words that I don't actually know what they mean, but I've read them, trading the carbon emissions and you know, developing an international market for the carbon. Now these areas that these communities live in, the map of the areas that are of most interest for climate change mitigation and adaptation, and the maps of the carbon, where the most carbon is, and the maps of where all the indigenous peoples are all the same. So now there's a value. And now, but the problem is that the dialogue is happening totally separate and apart from these communities. So what these communities had in terms of what we would call kind of collateral, the trees that they have preserved, that they have been stewards of these areas, now they have a value. But they're still not being able to use those assets for their own purposes. That's still now the government is, a lot of governments in Latin America, and I'm talking about Colombia has actually been relatively progressive on this issue and have agreed that there is some community benefit and that the community should have an ownership interest in the trees. Venezuela, Guyana, Brazil, Bolivia, it changes by the day. But now there's this whole discussion of now who owns these trees. Because now these trees are being given a value. They're on international emissions markets. Most of these trees are worth $1, which doesn't sound like very much, but these areas are all trees. So there's actually is quite a bit of money. And don't forget, they're not cutting down the trees. So they're worth $1 for this, but they're also worth something to the community. So I think the issue for us is that it doesn't fit. Indigenous communities don't fit because we technically can only work government to government, and for the bank that means national government. You know, if we try to break that out a little bit, there's always big calls on the issue of Indigenous peoples. It comes up all the time, and it's the same discussion that we have here in Canada. Well, the sovereignty, you know, so then that becomes the big word, and because it's not a very well developed, this whole issue of what relationship, and in most of the countries I work in, most of the communities' relationship with government isn't well established. There's not an agreement about how that relationship works. It becomes very hard for us to work directly with the communities, except when it comes to grants. So I think for us, you know, for the work we're doing with communities in Latin America, it comes back to the issue that it is everywhere, which is the issue of value. Does the community have something of value? And of course, it only comes up as a commodity or a value when someone else wants it, in which case then now it's not for the community to use it as their own collateral for access to capital. And there's also, you know, there's a distrust, you know, of what are the communities going to do with it, because these are areas where Indigenous communities have gone it's been very violent, their relationship with governments. So there is quite an issue of distrust of, you know, how much do you give communities, how much are you allowed to talk to communities. And I have to say that a lot of people who make these kinds of decisions at the bank also don't understand that the communities have their government, the communities actually govern their communities and their territories, and that may be different from what the government says. And they will just say, well, no, the government said that there's no problem. And the government says, oh, the communities don't own any of these areas. And if there's a mine, magically the community gets moved. And if there's a road, magically the community gets moved. And so I don't think it's been very well, there's not a lot of thinking about it yet. Still working on very basic issues.
What about micro-lending then? I mean, this has been a topic that has come up. Is that an alternative to this model?
Well, and I think you probably see this a lot in Mexico too. The issue of cooperatives has been very, very successful in Latin America. It's very culturally relevant for people to come together. And actually that's interesting.
I love women's groups.
Women's groups. Right now, I've been working on these things called conditional cash transfers, which is an income support program to give to people to take their kids to school. And one of the unintended consequences has been women coming together with the extra money and buying some chickens, buying a goat, doing some things that will provide them with more, which will basically build on their income. So I think though micro and I was going to tell you, we actually have the cucumbers might actually be a good candidate for. We have a small and medium enterprise part of the bank that lends directly, but they're grants. The idea is that it's seed money, it's to get things going, because I guess the assumption is that eventually they'll be able to carry it if they have a lot of support. So I'll give you
Great.
so,
Yeah, nice to see you. Just a couple of other things. From our own experience, you know, a benefit to the community is one of those things that I'll give you an example. We had a company in Tucson that very high-profile type of a program they wanted to. They needed a partner with the tribe in order to get a contract from the Defense Department, and there was nose cones for